Okay, so let's just dive right in. It is Thursday, January 29, 2026. And if you've been anywhere near a news feed, a television screen, or honestly just paying attention for the last 48 hours, you know exactly what the atmosphere feels like.
Oh, yeah. It is thick.
It's heavy, and the clock isn't just ticking. It feels like it's hammering.
It really does. It's that feeling right before a thunderstorm breaks. But on a geopolitical scale, the world is essentially watching a split-screen reality right now.
Oh, split screen, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, on one side you have the machinery of war, and I mean heavy machinery ramping up to levels we haven't seen in years. And on the other side you have this frantic, almost desperate diplomatic hustle happening behind closed doors.
Right, and usually when we talk about this kind of hustle, we're looking at, what, Washington or maybe Geneva or even Tehran itself. But today, the center of the universe, for all intents and purposes, is Ankara, Turkey.
Which is fascinating in itself, isn't it? Turkey has suddenly become the fulcrum. If the world manages to avoid what everyone is calling the sequel, it's going to happen because of conversations taking place in Turkey tomorrow.
So let's set the immediate context for everyone listening, because things are moving so fast. We are looking at a high-stakes diplomatic mission unfolding in, literally real time. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is scheduled to travel to Ankara tomorrow, Friday.
Right.
Now, I've seen diplomatic schedules before. Usually it's a lot of photo ops and, discussions about trade tariffs. But this is not that, is it?
No, not even close.
Yeah.
Far from it. This is an emergency shoot. This is break glass in case of fire. The primary mission here is singular, avert a U.S. military attack. We are hearing reports that the atmosphere in Tehran is, well, it's incredibly tense.
Understandably.
The threats are mounting, deadlines are looming, and Araghchi is heading to Turkey to see if there is any way at all to pull the brakes before this train goes right off the cliff.
So that is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to dissect this brinkmanship between the United States and Iran. And honestly, looking at the source material we have in front of us, it is a mess. It's a tangle.
It really is.
We have aggressive military posturing. We're talking big ships, thousands of troops. We have urgent back-channel diplomacy. And perhaps most fascinatingly, we have a deeply, deeply fractured domestic situation inside Iran itself that might be driving a lot of these decisions.
It's the internal pressure cooker combined with the external siege. You really can't understand one without the other. They're completely intertwined.
We are working from a massive stack of reporting, primarily from The Guardian, which has been detailing the military movements, the very specific demands coming out of the Trump administration, and the chaos on the streets of Tehran. But before we get into the heavy military stuff, we have to address the elephant in the room, or rather the ghost in the room.
You mean June?
I mean June.
Yeah.
We just can't talk about January 2026 without talking about the June War of 2025.
No, you're absolutely right. The 12-day war, that conflict fundamentally reshaped the landscape we are standing on today. It's the prequel to everything we're seeing.
For those of us who might have been tuned out last summer, or maybe just repressed the memory because it was frankly terrifying, can you walk us back? What actually happened in those 12 days, and why is it casting such a long, dark shadow over this specific Thursday in 2026?
Sure. So back in June, we saw this massive escalation. It was short, less than 2 weeks, but the intensity was just off the charts. The U.S. administration, specifically President Trump, claimed that the objective was to obliterate Iran's nuclear infrastructure.
Obliterate. Not damage, not set back.
No, obliterate. That was the word. And for 12 days, there were these very targeted strikes, a huge wave of cyber attacks, and even some special operations raids on the ground.
And the narrative at the time was mission accomplished, wasn't it? I remember the press conferences.
Yeah.
Very triumphant.
That was the political narrative for sure. Trump came out and said they had wiped out the program, end of story. But the intelligence community, well, they were much more conflicted. There were reports trickling out that while the surface facilities were hit hard, the core knowledge, the scientists, and crucially, the deep-buried centrifuges at places like Fordo probably survived.
So it was more of a bloody nose than a knockout blow.
That's a great way to put it. But more importantly, it changed the psychology of the Iranian regime. It fundamentally altered their strategic calculus.
How so?
Before June, there was this kind of idea of managed conflict. You push a little, I push a little, proxies fight proxies. It was a shadow war. The June war broke that unwritten contract. It showed Tehran that the U.S. was willing to go kinetic directly, not just through proxies in Iraq or Yemen.
They were willing to hit Iran, in Iran.
Exactly. It left scars, physical and political, that haven't healed. This standoff we are seeing now is, in many ways, the sequel, or perhaps the final act of what started 7 months ago.
So Iran is wounded, paranoid, and, you could argue, potentially more dangerous because of it.
Exactly. A wounded animal is unpredictable. And that brings us right up to the Hail Mary pass we are seeing play out today.
Oh, this detail. I found this absolutely wild when I was reading through the reports. Turkey's president, Erdogan, has thrown a proposal on the table. And it's a video conference.
A Zoom call to save the world. It sounds like a movie tagline.
It really does. He wants to set up a direct video conference between Donald Trump and the Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian. I mean, on the surface, it sounds so simple, right? Just send a calendar invite, project, world peace. But as we dig into the sources, it turns out that suggestion is a diplomatic minefield.
It's a fascinating disconnect between how the West operates and how the Iranian regime saves face. To us, a call is just a call. To them, it's a powerful symbol. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the geography. Let's go to Ankara.
Let's do it. Why Ankara? I know Turkey's a regional power, but why are they the main mediator right now? Where's the UN? Where are the Europeans? Where's Russia? Usually the Kremlin loves to insert itself into these things.
Well, the Kremlin is there, but they're kind of shouting from the sidelines. Russia has urged both sides to recognize there's still time for diplomacy, but they aren't the ones driving the car this time. They have, their own issues to deal with. Turkey has taken up the mantle, and frankly, it's out of sheer necessity.
Self-preservation.
Precisely. You just have to look at a map. Turkey shares a massive, rugged border with Iran. They are historical frenemies. They've been rivals since the Ottoman and Persian empires, but they also trade constantly. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan is actively trying to, and I love this phrasing from the reports, make things better tolerated for Iran.
Make things better tolerated. Wait, hang on. That sounds like corporate HR speak for delivering terrible news. Is he twisting arms or is he begging?
He's doing a bit of both, I think, but mostly he's trying to be the cushion. He's trying to soften the blow of what's being asked of Tehran. Because Turkey knows, better than anyone, that if a war breaks out, a real sustained war, it won't stay contained to Iranian borders. It spreads like a fire.
Refugees, for one thing.
Millions of them, potentially. And the economy. Energy prices would spike, trade routes get completely blocked. Turkey is right next door. They have immediate existential skin in the game. If Iran catches fire, Turkey gets badly singed.
And Hakan Fidan isn't just a generic diplomat. Right. I seem to recall he has a specific background that makes him uniquely suited for this kind of crisis management.
You're spot on. Before he was foreign minister, he was the head of Turkish intelligence, the MIT, for years. He knows where all the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. He has likely spent years talking to Iranian security officials in smoke-filled back rooms. He speaks their language, the language of security and threats, not just the language of diplomatic niceties.
So when he meets with the Americans, he's translating that security state logic. He can tell them, look, this is how the IRGC will see this proposal. This is what will trigger them.
Exactly. Just this Thursday, he met with the U.S. ambassador to Ankara, Tom Barrack, who is also, not coincidentally, the special representative for Syria. So the channels are wide open. The U.S. is talking to Turkey. Turkey is talking to Iran. It's a high-stakes game of telephone, but with nuclear implications.
Which brings us back to that anathema proposal. President Erdogan proposing this direct video conference between Trump and Pezeshkian. You called it high-wire diplomacy, but I'm trying to figure out who falls off the wire here.
Well, think about the personalities involved. For Donald Trump, this is right in his wheelhouse. He loves the big meeting, remember North Korea?
The summit with Kim Jong-un, the photo ops, the walk across the DMZ, the spectacle.
Exactly. He loves the spectacle, personal deal-making, man-to-man. Cut through the bureaucracy, get on a screen, and hammer it out. It appeals to his ego and his style of governance. I looked him in the eye, and we made a deal. A video call is the next best thing.
Okay, so Trump is probably fine with a Zoom call. He'd probably live stream it on social media if he could. But for the Iranians, the sources describe this idea as anathema. That is such a strong word.
It means it is loathed. It is accursed. To the circumspect, highly protocol-driven Iranian diplomats, this is a nightmare scenario. You have to remember, there have been no formal direct talks between the U.S. and Iran for a decade. 10 years of silence, broken only by intermediaries passing notes in Vienna hotels.
So to suddenly jump on a video call with the great Satan while U.S. warships are parked just off your coast.
It looks like surrender. It looks like weakness. In the Middle East, honor and face are tangible currencies. They're strategic assets. If Pezeshkian gets on that call, he is visually submitting to Trump's demand for a meeting. The hardliners back home, the guys in the Revolutionary Guard with the guns, would eat him alive. They would call it treason.
So Erdogan is pitching a solution that works perfectly for one side but is culturally and politically toxic for the other. Is that just naive, or is he trying to force their hand?
I think he's pitching it because he's desperate to break the deadlock. He knows that the traditional route sending memos back and forth through Swiss diplomats is just too slow. The clock is ticking way too fast for memos. He thinks if he can just get them in the same room, virtual or otherwise, the dynamic might shift.
It's a long shot.
A very long shot.
Meanwhile, we have the official confirmation of the trip. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Esmail Bakai hopped on social media to confirm Araghchi is coming. But the language... I read the statement, and it felt like I was reading a press release from 1995. It was so standard.
Oh, totally boilerplate. He said Iran wants to strengthen relations with neighbors based on good neighborliness.
Good neighborliness. I mean, I like my neighbors. I borrow sugar from them. I don't usually rush over to their house on a Friday because I'm afraid of being bombed by a superpower. The subtext is screaming.
That's the diplomatic code. They can't say, we are flying to Ankara to beg for a way out. They can't admit panic. They have to say, we are strengthening regional ties. But everyone, and I mean everyone, from Washington to Moscow to Beijing, knows the subtext. The subtext is crisis management, pure and simple.
Okay, so the diplomats are scrambling in Turkey, trying to set up Zoom calls that nobody really wants to take. Let's pivot to why they are scrambling. Let's talk about the hardware. Section 2, the military threat. And the phrase of the day coming straight from the White House seems to be, time is running out.
Donald Trump's words, time is running out. And he wasn't being subtle about what happens when the clock hits zero. He vowed that any U.S. attack would be violent and far more extensive than the U.S. intervention in Venezuela.
That is a very specific and very loaded comparison. Venezuela was not a small operation. But for listeners who might not have the details of that intervention at their fingertips, why use that as the yardstick? What message does that send?
It sends a message of regime decapitation. The Venezuelan operation wasn't just about hitting a few military targets. It was a comprehensive campaign designed to cripple the Maduro government's ability to command and control. It involved cyber, special forces, air power, and naval blockades.
It's systemic.
Systemic is the perfect word. So by invoking that, he's signaling that this won't just be a few cruise missiles hitting a radar site like in the June War. He's threatening a systemic takedown of the Iranian state's ability to function. A shock and awe campaign on steroids.
And it's not just Trump, right? It feels like a coordinated rhetorical blitz from the whole cabinet.
It absolutely is. It's a full-court press. You have Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and he's putting hard numbers on the board. He acknowledged that there are 30,000 U.S. military personnel currently within reach of Iranian weapons.
That feels like such a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's a show of force. We are here, we have assets in theater. But on the other hand, that's 30,000 potential casualties. 30,000 hostages to fortune if things go sideways.
It serves two purposes, though. One, it highlights the risk the U.S. is taking, showing its allies and its enemies that they are all in. But two, and this is the crucial part for understanding their strategy, it serves as a justification for preemptive action.
The self-defense argument.
Exactly. The logic goes like this. We have 30,000 troops in the danger zone. Iran has missiles that can hit them. Therefore, we have to strike Iran's missile sites first to protect our people. It builds the legal and moral case for striking first.
And then you have Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. He was at a cabinet meeting on Thursday, and his quote was just chillingly efficient. He said the Defense Department is ready to deliver whatever this president expects.
Hegseth is playing the role of the enforcer here. He's the guy polishing the baseball bat in the background while the others do the talking. His view is crystal clear. Iran has options. They can make a deal. But they must not pursue nuclear capabilities. If they cross that line, the military is ready. There's no hesitation, well, let's see. It's binary, deal or destruction.
But, and here's where it gets confusing, or maybe just purely strategic, Trump is doing this good cop, bad cop routine all by himself, which honestly is bewildering to watch from the outside.
It's the classic Trump playbook. Keep them guessing, create uncertainty.
Right. So on one hand, you have violent and far more extensive attack, fire and fury. But then on Thursday night, he's at the Kennedy Center.
Yeah.
Fancy venue, people in tuxedos, a totally different crowd. And he sounds almost conciliatory.
He did. He mentioned he was planning to talk to Iran. And then he gave this quote, which is just, it's so Trumpian, you have to hear it to believe it. He said, we have a lot of very big, very powerful ships sailing to Iran right now, and it would be great if we didn't have to use them.
Big, powerful ships. It's almost childlike in its phrasing, like a kid playing with toy boots in the bathtub. I have big boats.
But the threat is absolutely unmistakable. It's brandishing the stick while saying, hey, wouldn't it be nice if I didn't have to hit you with this amazing, beautiful stick? It keeps the adversary completely off balance. Is today the day we are dealing with the man who wants to talk or the man who wants to use the big ships? Iran has to prepare for both, which exhausts them mentally and strategically.
Speaking of preparation, Iran isn't just sitting there waiting to be hit. They are talking tough, too. And this brings us right back to that June war context. The U.S. claims they obliterated the nuclear program, but Iran is saying, not so fast. And we learned some lessons.
Right. Army Chief Major General Amir Hatami made a big announcement. He said that since June, they have completely revised their tactics. They did a full after-action report. They saw where they were vulnerable, and they adapted. And the headline number he threw out is staggering. He claims they have built 1,000 sea and land-based drones.
1,000 drones. In just over 6 months. Is that even possible from a manufacturing standpoint?
In a war economy, absolutely. You have to understand these aren't sophisticated multi-million-dollar Reaper or Global Hawk drones. These are relatively cheap, mass-produced suicide drones.
The one-way UAVs that Secretary Rubio mentioned.
Exactly. A one-way UAV is just a polite way of saying a kamikaze drone. It's basically a lawnmower engine with some cheap wings and a warhead strapped to it. It flies to a GPS coordinate and it explodes. It's a cruise missile for a country that can't afford real cruise missiles.
So why does the number 1,000 matter so much? Why not 100? What's the strategic significance of that number?
It's the swarm tactic. It's about saturation. Even the best air defense system in the world, like the Aegis cruisers on those big ships, can be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. If you shoot 500 drones at a carrier group from multiple directions, the Phalanx guns and the SM-6 missiles might shoot down 490 of them, but 10 get through. And 10 hits from explosive-laden drones can disable a multi-billion-dollar aircraft carrier.
That is a terrifying math problem.
It is. It's the essence of asymmetric warfare. It's their way of leveling the playing field. Hatami is saying these drones, combined with their existing ballistic missile arsenal, can provide a crushing response. He's sending a clear warning to the U.S. You can hit us, but you will bleed too. Your ships are not invincible.
But they have an Achilles heel. The sources are pretty clear in identifying a specific weakness that Iran has.
Their air defenses. It's their glass jaw. Iran can punch back, but they have a very hard time stopping incoming attacks. They know for a fact they can't stop a full-scale U.S. air campaign. Their radar is outdated. Their interceptors are a mix of old Russian and Chinese systems. Their strategy isn't defense, it's deterrence through offense. The message is, if you hit us, we will hit your 30,000 troops and your ships in the Gulf with 1,000 drones. It's mutually assured destruction, but on a conventional regional level.
Okay, so we have the threat, we have the military buildup, the gun is clearly on the table. Now, let's look at what the U.S. is actually asking for. Because if Abbas Araghchi is going to Ankara to make a deal, he needs to know the price tag. And according to our sources, the price tag is astronomically steep.
It's incredibly steep. It's not a negotiation starting point. It looks more like the terms of a surrender. Administration officials have laid out 4 very specific demands.
Let's run through them one by one because the devil is absolutely in the details here. Demand number 1, handover of the entire highly enriched uranium stockpile to a third party.
That's the ensure no bomb demand. Basically, the U.S. is saying, we don't trust you with this fuel. We don't believe you won't make a bomb. Give it to Russia, give it to China, give it to the IAEA. We don't care, but get it out of your country now.
Demand number 2, an end to all domestic uranium enrichment, period. Full stop.
Now, pause for a second here. Why is enrichment itself the red line? Can't they have nuclear power without having the bomb? I thought you needed different levels of fuel for that. You do, and that's the nuance that gets lost. For a nuclear power plant to keep the lights on, you need uranium enriched to about 3 to 5% purity. For a bomb, you need to get it up to 90%. The problem is the core technology, the centrifuges, is the same. It's a dual-use technology.
So if you can enrich to 5%, you can theoretically, if you leave the machines running longer and refeed the fuel, get to 90%.
Exactly. The U.S. position is, we don't trust you to stop at 5%. So the demand to end all domestic enrichment is a sovereignty killer for Iran. They have always argued, as a matter of national pride, that they have a right to peaceful nuclear energy like any other modern nation. Stopping enrichment entirely is like giving up a massive scientific and industrial sector. It's a public admission that they can't be trusted with modern physics.
That's an incredibly hard sell back home.
Bah.
Okay, demand number 3, strict limits on the missile program.
This one hits their core defense strategy. As we just discussed, their missiles and drones are their only real way to project power or deter attacks. They don't have a modern air force. Their air force is basically a collection of flying museums from the 1970s, so if you take away their missiles, you're effectively disarming them. You are leaving them naked in a very dangerous neighborhood.
And finally, demand number 4, an end to all support for proxy groups.
This is the regional demand. Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Syria and Iraq. The U.S. wants Iran to cut the cord to all of them.
But isn't that their entire foreign policy doctrine for the last 40 years?
It is. That is how they project influence beyond their borders. They call it the axis of resistance. The U.S. is demanding that they dismantle their entire regional network. This effectively rolls back Iranian influence across the entire Middle East and isolates them completely inside their own borders.
So, if I'm hearing this right, the U.S. is basically asking Iran to surrender its nuclear program, its national defense strategy, and its entire foreign policy all at once.
Yes. And that is why the expert analysis on these demands from all corners centers on one single powerful word: humiliation.
Humiliation.
Accepting these demands wouldn't just be a strategic loss. It would be a profound national humiliation for the Iranian leadership. And in international relations, especially with a regime like Tehran's that relies on projecting strength and defiance to its own people, humiliation is dangerous. It can lead to collapse or a suicidal last stand.
Even her confidant, the Turkish foreign minister, our guy in the middle, acknowledges this reality. He said Iran is ready to negotiate the nuclear file, but the optics of these other demands are incredibly difficult. He admitted it is hard to explain these concessions to the Iranian leadership and people.
Hard to explain is the diplomatic understatement of the year. Imagine the Iranian leadership going on state TV and saying, "Friends, we are giving up everything because America told us to." It would look like a total abject capitulation. Fidan is trying to find a way to package this so it doesn't look like a surrender, even if it essentially is one.
Fidan also gave some pretty blunt advice to Iran, didn't he? He told them they need to change their face.
That was a striking comment coming from a neighbor and a supposed mediator. He said they need to change their face to the Middle East and actually start caring about how they are perceived by regional countries. He's telling them, you have scared your neighbors for too long, you've bullied them with your proxies, and now that you need friends, you look around and realize you don't have many left.
He's basically telling them to work on their regional trust issues.
Yeah, and that's a long-term project. Trust isn't built overnight, and they don't have that kind of time.
And speaking of those neighbors, the Gulf states are already making moves to protect themselves from the fallout.
They are. Most of the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, have all put out statements saying they will not allow their airspace or territory to be used for attacks on Iran.
Now, is that them siding with Iran? Is that some sort of newfound solidarity?
No, absolutely not. That is pure fear. That is them trying to shield themselves from reprisals. They know that if a U.S. bomber takes off from a base in their country to hit Tehran, Tehran's first volley of missiles will be fired back at them. They are trying desperately to stay out of the crossfire. It's self-preservation, not friendship. They are screaming to both sides, please leave us out of this.
Okay, so the external pressure is at an absolute all-time high. You have the ships, the 4 demands, the regional isolation. But what really struck me in the reading for this deep dive, and this is the part that I think gets lost in the headlines about missiles and drones, is that the internal pressure in Iran might be even worse. Section 4, the domestic pressure cooker.
This is the variable that changes everything. This is the wild card. If this were just a military standoff, the regime might act one way. But Iran is not a unified bloc. The society is described in all the reporting as increasingly polarized.
We have 2 distinct camps, essentially.
Right. On one side, you have the camp that is rallying around the flag. They hear the U.S. threats, and they get patriotic. Don't be bullied by the West. Nationalism is a powerful drug, even if you don't like your own government. When a foreign power threatens you, you stand up.
But then you have this other camp, and they seem to be growing louder and more defiant.
The camp that is intent on provoking the regime's collapse, they see this crisis not as a threat, but as an opportunity, a window.
They are thinking, if the U.S. hits the Revolutionary Guards, maybe the whole oppressive system comes crashing down with them.
Exactly. They are betting on chaos. They are willing to risk a devastating war if it means freedom from the mullahs. That is a desperate and incredibly dangerous calculation.
And President Pezeshkian, the man who was supposed to be on that Zoom call with Trump, is caught right in the middle of this. He's trying to play the healer. He's talking about binding a wounded society back together.
A very difficult needle to thread.
And he made a promise recently that I found very specific and very grim. He promised to publish a full official list of those killed in the recent government crackdowns on protesters.
This is his attempt at transparency, at lancing the boil. He says he wants to publish the list in conjunction with the grieving families. He wants to own the tragedy in order to move past it. He's trying to say, I hear you. I see your pain. Let's have a reckoning so we can heal.
But does anyone actually believe him? Does that have any credibility on the street?
That's the problem. The credibility gap is a canyon. Distrust in the government is so high that few believe the official numbers will be anywhere near the truth. The sources say it is doubtful he can convince anyone that the death toll wasn't in the tens of thousands. If he releases a list with 500 names, the people will call him a liar. If he releases a list with 10,000 names, the regime's hardliners might arrest him for treason. He's in a completely no-win situation.
And we have voices from inside the prisons calling him out directly. Mustafa Tassadeh. Who is he, for those who don't know?
Yeah, he's a heavyweight. A well-known reformist politician who has been in and out of the notorious Evin prison for years. He's speaking from inside a jail cell right now, and he did not mince words.
No, he really didn't. He called the official death toll a disgraceful lie. He's demanding an independent inquiry into what he calls an unprecedented massacre.
When you have high-profile political prisoners speaking out with that kind of moral authority, it completely undermines any attempt by the president to say, look, we are turning a page. It keeps the wound open and festering.
And then there is Mir Hossein Mousavi, the former prime minister. This is a guy from the Green Movement back in 2009, right?
Yes, he's been under house arrest for well over a decade. He is the symbolic leader of the opposition. And his quote from a letter smuggled out, it gave me chills. He said, enough is enough. The game is over.
The game is over. That's a devastating critique coming from a former insider, a man who was once at the heart of the system. He's not just complaining. He's offering a roadmap for regime change from within.
He is. He's calling for the regime to stand aside for a constitutional referendum, a total reset.
Based on 3 principles, right? Let's break those down because they're important.
First principle, non-interference from abroad. This is crucial. He's telling the U.S., stay out of this. This is our fight. He doesn't want an American-led invasion or a U.S.-installed puppet government.
Second, rejection of domestic tyranny.
Plain and simple. Kick the mullahs out. End the theocratic dictatorship.
And third, a peaceful democratic transition.
He wants an internal revolution, not an external conquest. He is calling on the Iranian people to take their country back peacefully, not for the U.S. Marines to hand it to them on a platter.
Which brings us to the U.S. stance on all this, the official stance on regime change. Trump is, well, ambiguous is one word for it.
Ambiguous is generous. He fluctuates wildly, sometimes day to day. One day he claims he wants to defend the protesters. He uses that human rights language. We stand with the brave people of Iran. But the next day, he links the military threats solely to the nuclear program. Give up the nukes and we're good.
But the implication is always there, under the surface.
It is. The implication is that strikes on the Revolutionary Guards could trigger that very collapse the protesters are hoping for. If you decapitate the state's security force, does the mob then take the palace? It's a gamble the administration seems willing to consider.
But Marco Rubio, speaking to Congress, was much more cautious about this idea. He seemed to be pumping the brakes.
He was. He warned that regime change requires careful thinking. He noted that this government has been in place for a long time, since 1979. It has deep roots. It has patronage networks. You don't just knock it over and expect a Jeffersonian democracy to sprout the next day. Rubio is clearly aware of the chaos that follows a power vacuum. Look at Iraq. Look at Libya. He doesn't want to own the mess that comes after the fall.
So we have a regime fighting for its life on 2 fronts, against the big ships of the United States and against the simmering anger of its own people. Which brings us to where we are right now, Section 5, the current standoff.
The looming deadline.
We keep hearing this phrase, time is running out. Is that just rhetoric to apply pressure, Or is there a real sense of immediacy? Does something feel like it's about to happen?
It feels very real this time. We know that senior defense and intelligence officials from both Israel and Saudi Arabia were in Washington this week. Axios reported that.
And what does that tell you? Why is that significant?
It tells you that this isn't just a bilateral U.S.-Iran issue. When the Israeli and Saudi intel chiefs are in the same waiting room in D.C., usually something big is being planned. You don't fly those guys in for a casual chat. It adds to the sense of a coordinated, imminent event. They are syncing their watches.
And in the face of all this, Iran is playing a dual strategy.
A survival strategy. A senior Iranian official told Reuters that they are preparing for a full-blown military confrontation while simultaneously using diplomatic channels. They aren't putting all their eggs in the Ankara basket. They are loading the missile silos at the same time that Araghchi is packing his suitcase for Turkey.
It's a game of survival, weighing what they call painful compromises against a devastating conflict.
And that is the choice Araghchi has to make when he sits down in that room on Friday. Does he accept the humiliation of the U.S. demands in order to save the regime from a war it probably can't win? Or does he gamble that the U.S. is bluffing, refuse the demands, and risk everything?
It's a hell of a gamble.
It's the ultimate gamble, with the fate of a nation of 80 million people on the table.
So let's bring this all together. Let's try to synthesize this. We have a massive military buildup, 30,000 troops, big powerful ships, 1,000 new Iranian drones. We have a specific set of hardline demands that look a lot like terms of surrender. We have a mediator in Turkey, Foreign Minister Fidan, trying to bridge a decade-long silence with a video call proposal that one side loves and the other side loathes. And we have an Iranian government squeezed hard between U.S. warships on one side and its own angry citizens on the other.
It is the absolute definition of a powder keg.
Okay.
And the fuse is lit and burning down fast.
So why does this matter to the person listening right now? Maybe they are in Ohio, maybe they're in London, maybe they're in Tokyo. Why should they care about Abbas Araghchi's trip to Ankara?
Because this isn't just about nuclear weapons in a bunker somewhere in the desert. This is about the potential reshaping of the entire Middle East. If this regime falls, or if a full-scale war breaks out, the instability radiates outward. It doesn't stay in Iran.
It immediately hits the gas pump.
It hits the gas pump instantly. Energy prices will soar. The shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz could be blocked. That's something like 20% of the world's entire oil supply. Global supply chains break. Refugee flows could destabilize Europe and Turkey. Terrorism could spike as groups take advantage of the chaos. And frankly, it sets a massive precedent for how nuclear proliferation is handled globally.
It's about whether diplomacy still works in a world of brute force.
Exactly. Can a conversation in a room in Turkey stop a fleet of warships? That is the test. Can words still stop weapons? We're about to find out.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought. Something for you to chew on after this deep dive ends. Turkey's foreign minister suggested that Iran needs to change its face to the region in order to survive. He's talking about perception, trust, diplomacy.
But here's the question. In a world of 1,000 drones and big, powerful ships, is there actually any room left for diplomacy? Or has the momentum of the June War, that conflict that started this whole downward spiral, already made a sequel inevitable?
Is the train simply moving too fast to stop?
Yeah.
Answer, if there is one, likely lies in that meeting room in Ankara tomorrow. We will be watching. You should be too. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Stay curious.